Om Namo Devaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So Hare Krishna, dear devotees. So tomorrow is appearance day of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So we will spread the session over two sessions and talk about life in times of this amazing personality. These are very nice Pranam mantras for Bhaktisiddhanta. So we can chant these first.
Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Namine Shri Vrishabhanuvi Devi Daitaye Kipadaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Daine Prabhave Namaha Madhuri Jwala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktida Shri Gora Karuna Shakti Vigraya Namostute Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Viruda Prasaidinta Twanta Harine.
Jai, very good.
Bhaktisiddhanta
Saraswati
Maharaj ki Jai.
Excellent. Okay, so his father was a Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So a very elevated personality. During the time of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's stay on this planet, Vaishnavism had been contaminated. It was lost pretty much. And it had become a little bit of a Sahaja movement. It was like pretenders. The standard had degraded. It was almost used as enjoyment. You know, they were justifying enjoyment in the name of religion. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur was very sad to see this. So he single-handedly resurrected the true Vaishnava Dharma. And he wrote many, many books in Bengali, Sanskrit, and English, which he sent around the world, actually. He traveled extensively in Bharat, giving lots of lectures. And he, as we said, single-handedly revived this pure movement of Nam Sankirtan, chanting of holy names. And he presented the glory of Lord Chaitanya to everyone. But in order for it to continue, he prayed for a successor. He prayed for a ray of Vishnu. And his prayer was answered. A son was born to him on February the 6th, 1874, while he was a government magistrate in the holy place of Jagannath Puri in Orissa. This boy was named Bimal Prasad, and that means one who has received as the mercy of Bimala Dev, which is the internal potency of Lord Jagannath in the form manifested externally or in this world as Durga. And through various signs, the Lord showed Bhaktivinoda Thakur and his wife, Bhagavati Devi, that this was a great soul sent by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to continue the preaching work Bhaktivinoda Thakur started. And it was witnessed by all that when the child came out of the womb, his umbilical cord was wrapped around him like a sacred thread worn by Brahmins. And that was an amazing sight. And then 6 months later, when it was the annual Jagannath Puri festival, Rath Yatra, that's right. The cart actually stopped in front of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's house and it wouldn't move. So at that time, his wife took the opportunity to present the child to Jagannath. And you were saying that this was the...
Yeah, so I think the cart actually was stopped there for 3 days. So all 3 days, Bhagavati Devi would take Bhaktisiddhanta to have darshan there. And it's said that Mahaprasad from Jagannath was actually offered to Bhaktisiddhanta as his Anprashan. So that was the first time he had grains.
Mm. And one time, one of the huge flagons hanging around the Lord fell and it encircled the child. So that's a great sign. As the boy grew, the Thakur instructed him in the science of Krishna consciousness. At the age of only 7, he had memorized all of the Bhagavad Gita, 700 verses, and he could explain them as well. So he was very strict as well with himself. One time he took a unoffered mango from the kitchen and he ate it, and from the deity room. And his father mildly chastised him. Why did you do that? It's not offered yet to the Lord. And Bimuk, that's Bimuk Krishna, 81, so it was about 7, 8. And this is quite a large family. I think they had about 10 children, didn't they? And the 4th son was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So there's Bhaktivinoda Thakur, his wife Bhagwati Devi, and a lot of children. So that time, Bimuk Prasad, he took the words of his father very seriously. He made a vow never to eat mango again. And throughout his life, he kept that vow. Whenever somebody would offer him a mango, he would say, I can't take, I'm a great offender. So very humble. At the age of 10, in 1885, he was initiated by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the first initiation, the Maha Mantra. And he was also given the Narsingha mantra. He was very intelligent. He could remember. We read something once, he'd just remember it forever. And he invented a phonetic alphabet. He was a lifelong brahmachari, so he never married. And as this says, even in the last days, he could reproduce word for word any passage of any book he had read 50 years back. He also was awarded a title Siddhanta Saraswati because he was very proficient in astrology, both Eastern and Western. So he was awarded that title by his tutors. And at some point, he got this name, Sri Vrishabhanavi Daita Das, the servant of the lover of Srimati Radharani. Very nice name. So this is him as a student in the 1890s. He entered college, Sanskrit college in Calcutta. He obviously read all the books in the library. He also attended a cultural association in Calcutta called the August Assembly. There was a lot of philosophical debates, and he became a very powerful debater. So powerful that one time he defeated somebody he was debating with, and the other person passed water. So he was such a powerful debater. In 1895, he took a job with the royal family of Tripura, which was an independent state at that time. So he was in charge of the newsletter, the editor of their history. He also had the chance to read their library, which was very extensive. And when the father left, his son took over, and the son continued with the tradition. And Bhaktisiddhanta taught him many things. But later on, he gave up. He gave up that position because he was earning from that which he wasn't very happy with. So at the age of 23, in 1897, he opened a school called Saraswati Chatuspati, and he would teach Vedic astronomy. So he was very proficient in astronomy, but he later on gave it up completely. He would attend his father's satsangs, and he would be also writing for his father, the Nivedana. He wrote a book when he was very young in Bengali called the Bange Samajikatta. in 1901, his father asked him to take second initiation into the Gayatri Mantra from Gokishore Das Babaji, who was a very renowned saint in Navadvip. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur regarded him as his Shiksha Guru. So he asked him to take, but Gokishore Das Babaji was very humble. He didn't want to take any disciples. He was actually illiterate. So if you compare Bhaktisiddhanta, who's a scholar, to Gokishore Das Babaji, it was, from material eye, very unusual. But Gokishore Das Babaji was very advanced spiritually, but he was very humble at the same time. So he wouldn't say yes, he wouldn't say no. And Bhaktisiddhanta would go back to his father and say, he's not approving, not willing to give me initiation. Eventually, Bhaktivinoda Thakur said to him, look, you better go and take initiation from me, otherwise, I'm not going to let you back in this house. So then Bhaktisiddhanta, he went off with some determination, and he said to Gokishore Das Babaji that I'm going to just jump off this bridge unless you give me initiation, unless you accept me as your disciple. Otherwise, my father has told me human life is worthless without a spiritual master. So if you can't accept me, what's the point of living? So at that time, the Babaji did give him initiation, and he added Bhakti to his name. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. From that year, he traveled with the Thakur to many places of pilgrimage. He would engage in debate, and this was the one occasion where he was so strong in his debating that the professor who was debating with passed urine in the assembly out of shock. He stayed quite a long time in Jagannath Puri, but there was always some controversy there, because there were some Vaishnavas he regarded them to be in the Sahajya mood. They would chant mantras which were not really authorized. So there was always some controversy there, and the Thakur advised him, just go to Mayapur. Let's avoid the controversy. And so he traveled extensively in Bengal. In 1905, he went to the South Bharat. He was lecturing, preaching, writing, debating, fully absorbed in the message of Mahaprabhu. And he would visit many places in the South. I think what he did in the South was also, wherever Chaitanya Mahaprabhu visited, he placed lotus feet. He installed lotus feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wherever he visited. So it's really amazing. He took a vow to chant 1 billion names of Krishna at one point in Mayapur. Every day he would chant something like 192 rounds to get 1 billion done within a certain time frame. Very austere. One time his cottage, the roof started leaking, and instead of repairing it, he just put an umbrella up. So continued his chanting. So pretty strict. It took him 9 years to finish these billion rounds. It's a long session. He also was very proficient in publishing books. He realized early that actually the publishing books is more important, actually even more important than building temples. So he published many books, 61 books, as well as 8 different journals. And one time he was asked, how come you publish a journal every month just about God? Isn't that a bit boring? But he replied, in this world, there are thousands of newspapers and magazines reporting the stale, repetitious happenings of this limited space, the material world. So for reporting the news of the unlimited spiritual realm concerning the eternal, ever-fresh, Supreme Personality of Godhead, we could publish a magazine at every second, what to speak of monthly. So this is very interesting slant. I mean, we look at the news here, and it's the same news, just happening. It's the same things happening to different people. That's all it is. Stale. But in the spiritual world, everything is ever fresh. So very interesting. He, oh, that's right. He did some work with the Madhvacharya Sampradaya. Because as we saw with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Madhva Sampradaya was a major part of the Gaudiya Sampradaya. And what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati did, he, in a similar mood, he took the teachings from each of the Sampradayas, and one of them was the Madhva Sampradaya. In one of the temples in Mayapur, and we'll see that when we go in August, September, Naniben, there's one of his temples where he's got all the 4 acharyas installed in the different corners of the temple. Very interesting.
Wow. Where is this temple?
In Mayapur,
Mayapur.
yeah, we'll see it.
We're going to see that.
Yeah,
Okay.
we will see it. Yeah, it's very interesting temple. Amazing temple, actually. So I think is that where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's birthplace? Yeah, I think it is. Amazing place.
And he also, Bhaktisiddhanta, someone is asking, but that kirtan means just sitting down and playing, playing instruments and singing. They said, well, that only a few people benefit from that. But Sankit can also mean giving up books. And so that is why he was really adamant about publishing books. And that was also why his instruction to Prabhupada was print books and give out books, because you reach a lot more people that way.
And this point about the books, he actually established 4 different printing presses, and they would publish a lot of literature. So that's how I think he initiated 60,000 devotees, right? So that takes some doing. So a lot of this preaching was responsible for such a high number of disciples that he had. So in Calcutta, in Mayapur, Krishnanagar, and Kathak, he had so many different places where he had established his printing presses. He called them the
Brihad Madangas.
The Madanga would sound for a little while, but these books, they would go everywhere. And
that was the reason.
All over. Heard all over Bharat. In 1914, his father passed away, which was obviously very difficult for him. He took over a lot of his father's work. And then in 1915, his spiritual master also left, but Gokishore Das Babaji Maharaj. Now, he wasn't a sannyas at that point, but in 1918, he took Tridandi sannyas, and he didn't see anybody qualified to give him sannyas. So he did something very, very unusual, very controversial. He took sannyas in front of a picture of his guru. This is really, really out there. So, and usually sannyas is not authorized in Kali Yuga, but there's different types of sannyas categories. Some of them are not allowed, but when you're involved in the preaching of the holy names, that is allowed. So that's a sort of sannyas he took, where he's preaching away.
And also at that point, he didn't take on the white clothes, which the previous acharyas in this lineage wear, because they were all Babajis, like Gokishore Das Babaji, Bhakti Vinod, Jagannath Das Babaji. So he started he made a change of the sannyasis wearing orange at that point to distinguish them, and so that they can go out preaching a bit more as well, because Babajis wouldn't usually go out preaching.
Prabhuji?
Yes, anyway.
What is this sort of third sannyas that he took? What was it? Why was it necessary to do that?
Yeah, basically it's the vow that he will remain celibate throughout his life, not get married. So the necessity for preaching purposes, like Prabhupada, he took sannyas, he gave sannyas to many devotees, even though he knew that they were not really eligible for sannyas, but he did it. He gave them sannyas because he wanted this movement to grow and distribute the Krishna consciousness to a very wide range of people.
Yeah,
so
because if you look in Bharat, people would respect devotees in orange more as well. So, that was another reason, to wear the orange as well. And so that's why, even though he didn't need to, because he was celibate anyway all his life. It was just an example he set.
In this sannyas is a fourth order of varnashram, is it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you see, in Vedvyas has written he's stated that in Kali Yuga, sannyas is not appropriate. But there are certain categories of sannyas which is not good in Kali Yuga, because it'll just be like a bogus thing, But when you're involved with preaching, that's acceptable.
So when you want to be a sannyasi, you have to take, is there a certain procedure there?
Yes. Oh, there's a huge procedure. Yeah.
For everybody, even now.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it also means cutting all your ties with any family as well. So again, up to that point, so he was even though he wasn't attached, we were still like helping Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who is the guru of his guru. But again, it made a point that you at that point you're cutting all ties with your material family.
Okay.
Yeah, it's quite involved, the sannyas order. They have to take up a lot of vows as well, and they have to promise that they will do preaching and things like that. And
so that's what our Sutapa Prabhu is at the moment.
He's
training to do that. Yes,
I think he's on the list. In ISKCON, they have a time thing.
Yeah. So he's applied for it. So there's a waiting list, and during that waiting time, he has to prepare himself with all these regulations and rules that they have.
Okay.
Yeah, it's quite involved.
Yeah, because I think Bhakti Rasayan Maharaj was telling us one day what he had to go through as well.
Okay, thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Thank you. So yes, that was there you go. This is 2 days after taking sannyas, 29th of March, 1980. Excuse me. And on the same day, he established his first monastery, the first math, the first Gaudiya math it's a Chaitanya math in Calcutta. And this was later on became very huge, made of marble, very opulent temple. And initially he rented a small house, didn't he? And then later on, it became the Gaudiya Math. Later, they moved to this large marble building in Bagh Bazaar in Calcutta. That's still there. And I've never visited it. We should one day, but wonder what it's like now. So, and he established 64 of these maths throughout Bharat. Some of them were overseas, like in Assam, Nepal, but vast majority, 62 of them probably, were in Bharat somewhere. And in most of them, in many of them, he established the Murti worship, deity worship. So very unique. Yeah, this is in the 60s and 70s. Oh, no 60s. It'll be in the 30s and the 40s. So, but one thing he did want to do, he said, and a gentleman said to him, your Gaudiya Mata is so nice. You should open up temples in all cities of the world. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati replied, my real business is to establish temples in everyone's heart. It was really powerful, brilliant preaching. And his preaching was very, very strong. Sometimes he would grab a Mayavadi and shake him and say, oh, wait, you don't believe in the personal form of the Lord? Wake up. One time, a big impersonalist Vedanta society in Calcutta invited him to a debate on the condition he does not use the Bhagavatam as scripture evidence. He agreed. After a while, they told him, you can't speak on the Mahabharata, Ramayana, or Puranas, or Pancharatras either. He agreed, no problem. Then they called him again and said, you can't use evidence of any of the Vedas either, or Upanishads, or Smriti texts. But you could only speak from the Vedanta Sutras. He agreed to that, but eventually they called him and said, don't come at all. And they were just too scared of him. So, and for these 10 years, 1919 to 1929, he spent a lot of time traveling and really inspiring people, devotees, to take to Krishna consciousness. And he would install these footprints of Lord Chaitanya in 108 places where Mahaprabhu visited in the south of India, south of Bharat. But his preaching was mainly focused in Bengal and Orissa. That was the main focus. And Vrindavan also, he did Bhajmandal Parikram. He started the Bhajmandal Parikram. And in 1922, something fantastic happened. Srila Prabhupada, our own Srila Prabhupada, Abhay, he met him for the first time. Up to now, Abhay was not really interested in meeting too many sadhus because his father would always invite these sadhus and they were really just after money mainly. So he wasn't too impressed by them. But a friend of his, Narendranath Mulik, he told him, there's a really good sadhu coming. Why don't we go and see him in Calcutta? And Prabhupada was a little reluctant, but this friend of his persuaded him, yeah, okay. Eventually he said, let's go. So they went to one of the places in Calcutta and they went up to the class he was giving. They bowed down. They saw this person, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. He was a studious looking man wearing sannyas robes, small rounded spectacles. They bowed down. Before even Prabhupada got up, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati immediately said to both of them, you are educated young men, why don't you preach the message of Krishna all over the world? So that was his first interaction. And Prabhupada could hardly believe what he had just heard. They had not even exchanged any words yet. The sadhu was telling him what they should do. And Prabhupada, he challenged him. But who will hear your message? As long as we are a dependent country. So at that time, we were under British, India was under British Raj. And Prabhupada was very much into the Gandhi movement, get British out. So he questioned, if we're dependent on the British, who's going to listen to your message? First, we should become independent, and then we can spread our culture. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he replied in a deep voice, the message of Krishna cannot wait for a change in Indian politics. It is not dependent on who rules. The teachings of Bhagavad Gita are so important, so exclusively important, it cannot wait. So this is phenomenal preaching, and that really struck home with Prabhupada, our Prabhupada. The message of Bhagavad Gita is in the hands of a very expert person. So at that moment, actually, Prabhupada accepted within his heart Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami as his guru. But the actual initiation didn't take place until 11 years later in Allahabad. He took initiation from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur.
That place that Prabhupada first met him in Kolkata is called Ultadang. And actually, and ISKCON Kolkata have actually taken over looking after that place, and there's the grand opening of it tomorrow.
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 Wow. Okay. Interesting. So, in 1925, they went on another tour of Bengal. They did loads of tours, and these tours were very powerful. They would really preach and make so many devotees. And wherever he went, he was treated like a prophet because he was very powerful in his preaching. He was able to persuade people to take to this Krishna consciousness. But of course, there were always problems because Bhaktisiddhanta was very controversial in some of his. What he did was he would initiate as Brahmins and sannyas people who were not born in Brahmin families. And in those days, this was really controversial. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati would justify and show them through the scriptures that this is correct. Just because you're born a Brahmin doesn't mean you're a Brahmin. You have to act like a Brahmin, behave like a Brahmin. So he would preach very strongly against the incorrect philosophy of these proud and arrogant caste Brahmins. And of course, they would give him a hard time, or they would give the devotees a hard time. Sometimes they would close their shops and wouldn't allow the devotees to come and shop there. Even tried to kill him. The Nityananda Vamsas especially plotted to assassinate him. And they went to a local police magistrate to bribe him. But this magistrate, he knew Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was a great saint. So he went to him and told him, be careful. They want to assassinate you. So he also had a very unique style of preaching because he didn't care just for those who were educated. He cared for everybody, even the illiterate masses. And this is really profound. He started preaching through dioramas and lifelike figures to show people how Krishna consciousness works. And in Jagannath Puri, they still have these dioramas, very interesting, in the Gaudiya Math temples. And they would attract a lot of people. So one of the exhibitions, they drew 100,000 visitors every day for a month. That's a lot of people. And in 1933, he, stop there. We could stop here, yeah. He was eager to send this message beyond Bharat. So he sent some of his disciples to England in 1933. So this is like over 30 years after this, Prabhupada went to those states. But first, he sent some sannyas disciples to England to open up Gaudiya Maths in the West. But it was not easy, not easy. So this is, I think this is Bon Maharaj, who was sent to the UK. And they didn't have much success, but they did open up a branch somewhere in southwest London, I think Herne Hill. Some old lady donated her house to them. So, but it was largely very, very difficult to preach at that time. People were not open to hear Krishna consciousness. And this is them coming back in 1935. And Bon Maharaj, he brought a couple of German devotees who were very inspired by the teachings. And they took initiation from Bhaktisiddhanta and became quite very good devotees. And this is our own Srila Prabhupada. I like his moustache here. So we can stop there and we'll do part 2 tomorrow and continue with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's life. Very interesting personality, very important personality in our tradition. We would struggle without him. Any questions or any comments?
Yeah, greatly intelligent, isn't it? So much he has done.
Yeah.
Established how many? 60,000 more.
64
Temples.
temples and 60,000 disciples.
60,000. That's something, isn't it? Do you know how many disciples Srila Prabhupada had?
5,000 is between 5 and 10,000 was the number. But of course, Prabhupada, because he's, the way that they produce the Gita, and now because of the age of technology, the books are everywhere. So I would say, he's got more disciples than anybody in the world, because as a Shiksha Guru, his books are giving so much instructions to everybody, So I would say he's got millions of disciples. So
Brilliant. Wow.
amazing. Thank you, Nariman. Okay. Yes.
I mean, the Gaudiya Math was one unit when Bhaktisiddhanta was in. So after he left, it did get split up into different gurus establishing their own maths or taking over different maths. So you have the Gaudiya maths now, and even there, have different group sections as well. Whereas in ISKCON, it's still under that one umbrella of Prabhupada. Each temple still follows Prabhupada as a Shiksha Guru.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.